Senator Buono, thank you for speaking with Blue Jersey. The campaign is in full swing now. You've had several union endorsements. You've qualified for matching funds. What is your path to closing the gap in the polls?
Well, we're on that path, and what we will be doing is just more of what we're already doing, and that is getting out there, connecting with the voters all over the state, making sure that we have enough funds, and we will. We already have over $1 million, which will make us competitive in terms of making sure that we get our message out there. We're already very much involved in field work, on digital, as well as the conventional field work. And I think the more we're out there and the more people meet me and they hear our message, it resonates, and the gap will close. Why? Because we still have unemployment rate that is the highest it's been in over 3 years, fourth highest in the nation, hasn't budged. This governor has no economic plan to turn the corner on New Jersey, and we still have the second highest rate of foreclosures and the highest property taxes. So unfortunately, New Jerseyans are still struggling.
Tell us about your first day in office.
Oh, my first day in office, I'll probably just take a tour of. I think probably I'd take a tour of the cities, which I've been doing now. And our cities in particular are hurting. The unemployment rate is even higher in the cities, higher among men and women of color. And so what we're, at least at this point in time, that's where I've been spending an awful lot of my time in New Jersey.
There's been a lot of speculation about your choice for Lieutenant Governor. What's the timing in your mind, and what are the criteria that you're looking for in a running mate?
Well, my timing is that I'm going to get through the primary, even though there isn't a, we don't expect to have a primary in the traditional sense of the word, but so I'm just focused on our path to victory in November, and that's why we're working very hard, but I have not putting a lot of focus on the Lieutenant Governor until after the primary.
Okay. For the lack of a better term, you've been somewhat of an outsider in the Democratic Party, with some of the party bosses maybe not giving the enthusiastic support that is deserving of a gubernatorial candidate. Are you doing anything to mend fences, to bring everybody into the fold?
I think that, we Democrats, we're an unruly lot, I guess you might say. But I think we agree on more than we disagree on. For example, we agree that women should have the right to choose. We agree that we should accept federal funding for women's health care and should make it harder for women to get health care. We all agree that we should have an increase in the minimum wage tied to the rate of the cost of living. So we do agree on much more than we disagree. And I have to tell you that it's only March, and I've only announced a little over a month ago, and people are coalescing even more and more as my campaign structure is getting more formalized, and it's a very I'm very pleased at the support that we've been getting.
You and I talked on a cold winter day in Jersey City at a gun rally, and you gave a rousing set of comments calling for common sense gun laws. Since then, the Assembly has passed 22 bills. My understanding is that it's going to be coming to the Senate next month.
Yes.
Are all 22 bills going to flow through the Senate, or what should the Senate do? Well,
I'm not the Senate president. Only that individual and leadership gets to determine what the priorities will be. But I can tell you, I'm going to be front and center pushing to have the full complement of bills heard in the Senate. I think that parents, my children are out of school now, but for the parents that I know, they hold their breath when their kids go to school, fearing the scourge of gun violence, and they look upon this governor's empty promise of just creating a commission to study the issue of violence is just a stinging rebuke to their concerns.
Speaking of violence, we're recording this in Camden, which is probably one of the most violent cities in America. What should we be doing differently, and what could the state do?
Well, and it just so happens I went to law school here and spent a lot of time in here a number of years back. We need to focus on our cities. This governor, he likes to talk a lot about Sandy and how it erased the blackboard, and I think he went so far as to say that he can't imagine that there's anything else that's relevant to talk about as governor. And I agree with him that we have to have the restoration and rebuilding after Sandy a top priority. But there's another right here, and another New Jersey that is in dire need of rebuilding. And this governor's had poor policy choices, wrong priorities, and really inexcusable neglect for cities like Camden that have not made it any easier to make it have a turnaround here.
Okay, so there's probably no quick fix, but what are some of the things that you might put on the table that this governor hasn't?
Well, gun violence for one, and you just touched on it. I mean, we have to, in order for businesses to come and locate in our cities, they have to be they have to feel a certain level of comfort with the fact that there won't be an inordinate amount of gun violence, and education as well. I mean, education is it is the touchstone of democracy. It is the great equalizer, and we need to ensure that our public schools that we built on our examples of success, and so that would be my focus: education, eliminating gun violence, really passing a very strict list of priorities regarding gun violence, and also economic development. We need to make sure that we have jobs in the city that and that we hire local residents so we can put people to work as well. So it really is a combination of factors.
You mentioned education. The education funding formula is under attack by the Republicans. What changes are needed, and what would you do as governor to adequately fund our public schools? Well,
I would adhere to the school funding formula. As you know, I was the one senator to sponsor it. It was validated by the Supreme Court as constitutional in that it funded children regardless of their zip code to ensure that they have a quality education that should be a right and not a privilege just reserved for the few. We need to fully fund the formula. If fully funded, I can tell you that not only would our children have better access to education across the state, but it would also narrow the achievement gap, and we need to focus on that as well.
You mentioned the Supreme Court. Governor Christie's nominees, the two that had hearings, were rejected. One had some financial difficulties, and the other was pretty well unqualified. There are two new nominees. What would you do if you became governor and had the opportunity to appoint people to the Supreme Court?
Well, the problem that really started some time ago when the governor refused to renominate Associate Justice Wallace based on his written opinions. And he wasn't an exceptionally liberal judge. I think he was pretty middle of the road by all accounts. And by doing that, by refusing to, in his own words, to renominate him based upon those decisions, I think that really began to usher in the day when we're undermining the impartiality and the independence of the judiciary. I mean, if we wanted to have an elected judiciary here in New Jersey, we would have one. I mean, our Constitution was framed in such a way to ensure that politicians, like the governor, like myself, don't meddle in the workings of the court. You should appoint, and I would appoint judges that are qualified, and I would not have any, you certainly can't look to their written opinions, otherwise that just throws our whole system of jurisprudence to the wayside here in New Jersey. And we had a great Supreme Court. We were recognized and respected across the country.
And you say that politics shouldn't be part of the Supreme Court nomination process, yet there's kind of this unwritten rule that there should be political balance on the court. If you had the opportunity to appoint a justice where the balance was more towards the Democrats, would you appoint a Republican?
Well, I'm not going to speculate as to that. It really would be based upon the individual candidates and the circumstances at that time.
Okay. Let's move on to the environment. Governor Christie unilaterally pulled us out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. He hasn't exactly been enthusiastic about renewable energy. He's waived some environmental protection in the name of supporting businesses. What would you do differently?
Where do I start? The waiver regulation that you're talking about is a giant step backward for New Jersey in terms of economic, environmental protection. Unfortunately, one court upheld the waiver as being permissible under the law. I think I disagree with the courts, strenuously disagree with them, and I'm happy that there will be an appeal, because what this waiver rule does is it vests unbridled authority in the DEP commissioner, an unelected political appointee, to determine who the rules apply to and who the rules don't apply to. So if somebody comes to the DEP for a permit and they happen to be perhaps a political contributor, and I'm not saying that happened or that will happen, but that's a scenario that very easily could unfold. And then the DEP commissioner could determine that that particular permit doesn't have to be applied for because if it's unduly burdensome, and that is the very vague criteria that we have under this waiver regulation. I would not have pulled out of RGGI. RGGI, I was the sponsor of the Global Warming Response Act, and that was supposed to work in conjunction with RGGI to not just reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to create green jobs, and RGGI was working. We had started to create green jobs, and then this governor unilaterally withdrew us. You see, I don't believe that environmental protection and economic development are mutually exclusive goals. They don't have to be, and they shouldn't be.
Let's talk a little bit about the flagship of Governor Christie's campaign, which is Hurricane Sandy. Mm-hmm. Is there sufficient oversight right now in terms of three areas: the financial expenditures that are being used to clean up, the environmental regulations that we know that, for example, that there were some Superfund sites created in New Orleans when the same company cleaned up after Hurricane Katrina, and construction standards. I know the whole floodplain maps are still in flux, but are we doing enough there?
Well, no, we're not, and that's why the Senate, I requested the Senate President, and he eagerly agreed to have hearings. I'm the Vice Chair of the Senate Legislative Oversight Committee. We had the first of what is going to be, I think, 3 hearings at this point in time, and if we need more hearings, we'll have more hearings. And certainly the first hearing was on the process that led up to the governor selecting the no-bid contract to have Ashbridge, a company that the governor's mentor, Haley Barbour, the former Mississippi governor, was a principal of. And it should concern taxpayers when there's a no-bid contract that was selected, recommended by the governor's mentor. There was no attempt, and it was very interesting what came out at the hearing. Through the testimony of the principal from Ashbridge, he was very open in acknowledging that indeed there was no attempt made to negotiate the price. So New Jersey could have gotten a better price, but there was no attempt to negotiate it. New Jersey just adopted a no-bid contract, a contract that had been adopted by a different state, a state of Connecticut, 4 years before. So we had some answers to that question. Taxpayers deserve to know how these dollars are being spent for cleanup. There's an enormous amount that needs to be cleaned up and restored and rebuilt, and we need to make sure the taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently and appropriately. And to your point, in terms of the environmental issues that are coming out of this whole cleanup, I believe that is what our second hearing will be focused on.
And when is that hearing?
I think it's sometime in April. I believe it's sometime very soon.
Okay, great. Final question. The governor does a lot of things in terms of tax breaks and other incentives for business in the name of bringing jobs, the kind of the trickle-down theory that his mentor George W. Bush espoused. How would you bring business to New Jersey?
Well, one thing I would do is, I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't have pulled out of the ARC tunnel, which we know that not only would have built a new tunnel into the city, which we are in desperate need of, but it would have also created thousands of jobs. RGGI also, I wouldn't have pulled out of RGGI, thousands of jobs. A lot of people suggest that there's not a lot that a governor can do to jumpstart an economy, and I differ with them. And I can tell you that there are a number of pivotal mistakes this governor made. About a year ago, we had a number of package of bipartisan bills that were put on his desk from job retraining to creating public-private partnerships to one of my bills, which I thought it came from NJ Pro. Actually, it was a business think tank that recommended that we create partnerships between colleges and universities and the emerging markets, pharmaceutical, biotech, green energy, to lure more of these new jobs, these good-paying jobs to the state, and then train our kids in the research that's needed. The governor vetoed it and said some pretty disparaging things about this package of bills. And I think that a real leader comes to the table and tries to work with, this governor says he's bipartisan. That was certainly not an indication of bipartisanship. By disparaging them and ridiculing, legitimate efforts to do something about the job situation. So that's just an example of what I would do.
Senator Buono, thank you very much.
Thank you.